Chapter 1. The Cathedral. The stained glass windows of St. Andrew's Cathedral shattered the morning light into 1,000 colored fragments. Angels and saints glowed in crimson and gold as the California sun poured through centuries-old glass. 500 of the state's most powerful people had gathered beneath the vaulted ceilings for the Townsend Foundation's 10th anniversary celebration. Politicians whispered in corners. Judges shook hands with donors. Socialites compared jewelry while pretending not to. The choir had just finished its opening hymn, and the room hummed with the soft murmur of wealth and influence. No one expected to witness a crime. My name is Grace Mitchell, and 3 hours ago, my husband punched me in the face inside this cathedral while I was 7 months pregnant with our daughter. He thought no one would stop him. He thought his money and reputation made him untouchable. He thought I was too weak, too dependent, too afraid to ever fight back. But here is the twist nobody saw coming. The woman who walked through those cathedral doors next was the one person who could tear his entire world apart. And from that moment, Richard Townsend became a wanted man. This is the story of how I lost everything and found myself. How my mother returned after 30 years. How 6 abandoned women and 7 forgotten children brought down a monster who thought he could run forever. Sometimes the universe does not give you what you want. It gives you what you need. And what I needed was the truth. Grace stood near the marble podium, one hand resting on her belly. At 7 months pregnant, she often felt lightheaded in crowded places. But today she forced herself to breathe slowly and steadily. Her ocean blue maternity dress stretched gently over her stomach. Her grandmother's pearl necklace rested against her collarbone. She looked fragile, but beneath the exhaustion, she carried a quiet determination that had kept her alive through 3 years of marriage to Richard Townsend. Rick stood a few steps behind her. Navy suit tailored to perfection, dark brown hair slicked back with precision, gray eyes scanning the crowd like a predator surveying territory. His smile looked convincing from a distance. Up close, anyone with a trained eye would notice the strain in his jaw and the impatient flicker in his gaze. Rick valued image more than anything else. He had built his charity, his business, and his public reputation on flawless presentation. Tonight was not merely a celebration, it was a performance. The host invited Grace to speak. Just a brief thank you. Nothing more than a few sentences expressing gratitude to the donors. Rick had insisted she speak, even though Grace told him her doctor advised against standing for extended periods. Rick had answered with a cold stare that morning. A real wife supports her husband. So now she stood on the marble platform, feeling every heartbeat echo in her ears. Grace approached the microphone. Her voice trembled slightly as she began speaking. She thanked the guests, praised their generosity, tried to smile when the room applauded, but her breath caught halfway through her next sentence. A sharp pressure pulled at her lower belly. She placed her hand there instinctively, closing her eyes for a moment as she steadied herself. Rick noticed the pause. His expression tightened like a fist. He stepped closer, pretending to offer support, but whispering through clenched teeth, "Finish the speech. Do not embarrass me." Grace kept her gaze forward. She did not want the guests to notice anything. She knew what Rick was capable of when he felt humiliated. She hoped he would remain composed in front of so many people. Her voice faltered again. This time the pause lasted longer. She exhaled shakily, managed only a few strained words. Her cheeks turned pale. The cathedral air suddenly felt thick, suffocating. A few guests exchanged concerned glances. Someone whispered that the poor woman looked unwell. Another remarked that perhaps she needed water. Rick's face darkened. His forced smile collapsed into raw irritation. He stepped forward and grabbed Grace's arm with too much force. The gesture looked supportive to distant eyes, but his fingers tightened against her skin like a vice. Grace winced. Rick leaned in closer. "Finish the speech without making me look like a fool." She tried. God help her. She tried. Her lips parted, but the words refused to form. A wave of dizziness washed over her. Stars flickered at the edges of her vision. She lifted her hand to her forehead. The microphone picked up a soft gasp. A few people in the front row stood halfway, unsure whether to intervene. Rick snapped. The embarrassment, the whispers, the cameras, the feeling of losing control in front of powerful people. It all collided inside him like a storm. In one swift motion, he stepped in front of Grace, his fist clenched, his face twisted with rage. Before anyone could understand what was happening, Rick drove his fist forward. The sound echoed through the cathedral like a crack of thunder. Chapter 2. The man in black walks in his knuckles collided with Grace's cheekbone in a violent arc that sent her flying backward. Her body twisted in the air for a fraction of a second before she crashed onto the marble steps leading to the altar. The thud was loud. Her head snapped to the side. Her hand flew to her stomach. A cry escaped her lips. Sharp, broken. Pain tore through her abdomen like fire. The entire cathedral erupted into chaos. Gasps, screams, echoing footsteps, chairs scraping against stone. Someone shouted for help. Someone else yelled at Rick. Several guests rushed forward with phones raised, recording in shock. Grace lay curled on the cold marble, trembling. Her breath came in fractured gasps. Her vision blurred, her heart hammered out of rhythm. She felt the baby shift violently inside her. A deep, primal fear pulsed through every cell of her body. Protect Hope. Whatever happens, protect the baby. Rick stood over her, chest rising and falling with fury. His voice boomed across the sanctuary. No one has the right to interfere. He warned everyone to stay back. His words slurred with anger. Spittle flew from his mouth. For a moment, the room froze in a mix of panic and disbelief. Then the cathedral doors at the far end opened. A man stepped inside. He was tall, 6'4" at least, built like someone who had spent decades turning his body into a weapon. Broad shoulders straining against a perfectly tailored all-black suit. Short dark hair cropped close to his skull. Dark eyes that swept the scene with the cold efficiency of a predator. Everything about him radiated power, control, danger. He walked toward them, each step deliberate, each footfall echoing off the stone walls like a countdown. The guests parted before him like water. No one dared block his path. Rick's confident facade cracked. His gray eyes widened. James. His voice trembled. What are you doing here? The man called James Crawford did not answer. Rick. He knelt beside Grace instead. His movements were surprisingly gentle for a man his size. Mrs. Townsend? His voice was deep, calm, controlled. I work for Victor Sullivan. You are safe now. Grace tried to focus on his face. Everything hurt. The baby was moving frantically inside her. The baby. Her voice was barely a whisper. Please. My daughter. James pulled out his phone with one hand, while the other rested near her shoulder in a protective gesture. This is James Crawford. I need an ambulance at St. Andrew's Cathedral immediately. Pregnant woman, 7 months. Assault victim. Possible trauma to the abdomen. This is critical. He ended the call and turned his dark eyes to Rick. Do not move. The words were quiet but carried the weight of absolute authority. You are not going anywhere. Rick's face had gone pale. His bravado collapsed like a house of cards. A woman in a red dress stood near the side aisle. Long black hair. Hazel eyes now wide with fear. Veronica Blake had been watching the scene with satisfaction until James walked in. Now she was trying to slip toward the exit. James noticed. His gaze flicked to 2 security guards near the door. Stop her. She is involved. The guards moved instantly. Veronica found herself blocked before she could reach the threshold. Here is something every woman needs to understand. When someone shows you who they are in private, believe them. The mask always slips eventually. Document everything, because the truth will matter when justice comes calling. Victor Sullivan appeared at the end of the aisle. Silver hair slightly disheveled, charcoal suit jacket unbuttoned. The billionaire had clearly run from wherever he had been. Grace. He crossed to her in 3 strides and knelt beside her. His blue eyes were wild with fear. What happened? He punched her. James answered before Grace could speak. In front of 500 witnesses and 17 security cameras. Your niece needs a hospital immediately. Victor looked at Rick. The warm, grandfatherly expression disappeared. Something colder took its place. Something terrifying. James, make sure he does not leave this property. Already handled, sir. The paramedics arrived within minutes. Grace was strapped to a backboard with gentle efficiency. Her hands never left her belly. Hope was still kicking, still fighting. Strong, baby. One of the paramedics smiled down at her. She is going to be okay. As they wheeled Grace toward the ambulance, she saw Rick standing surrounded by security guards. His navy suit was wrinkled. His face was gray. His hands hung at his sides like he did not know what to do with them. He did not come to her, did not ask if she was okay, did not even look at her. He was too busy staring at James Crawford, at the man in black who had appeared from nowhere and was already dismantling his carefully constructed life. Chapter 3, The Hospital Trap. The hospital room was cold despite the California warmth outside. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Machines beeped steadily, monitoring Grace's vitals and the baby's heartbeat. Hope was okay. Grace was okay. Bruised and battered but alive. The doctor delivered the news with visible relief. No internal bleeding, no immediate danger to the pregnancy. Just bruises, shock, and the kind of emotional devastation that did not show up on medical scans. Grace lay in the bed with her hand on her belly, watching hope kick against her palm. Still fighting, always fighting. A nurse adjusted her IV and told her to rest. Easier said than done when your husband had just punched you in front of 500 people. The door opened. A distinguished man in an expensive gray suit entered. Silver hair perfectly groomed. Glasses lending him an air of intellectual authority. Jonathan Webb, the Townsend family attorney for over 20 years. Mrs. Townsend. His voice was warm, concerned. I came as soon as I heard what happened. That was completely unacceptable. I am here to help you. Grace looked at him warily. Jonathan had always been kind to her at family dinners, had remembered her birthday, had asked about her curatorial work at the museum. Help me how Jonathan sat down and produced a document from his leather briefcase. I have been concerned about Richard's behavior for some time. This is a preliminary protection agreement. If you sign it now, before Richard has time to hide assets, you will have significant leverage for the divorce proceedings. Grace took the paper with trembling hands. Her head was pounding. The legal language blurred before her exhausted eyes. Here is something every woman needs to know. Something Grace wishes someone had told her before that moment. When you are in crisis, predators will circle. They will offer help. They will seem kind. They will pressure you to make quick decisions before you have time to think. Never sign anything under pressure. True allies give you time to think. Predators create urgency. Grace hesitated. Should I read this more carefully? Jonathan's expression flickered with something that might have been impatience, quickly masked behind a concerned smile. Of course you should read it, but time is critical. Richard is already attempting to transfer funds to offshore accounts. If you do not act now, you could lose everything. Your house, your savings, your ability to provide for your daughter. The words hit Grace like hammer blows. Her daughter. Hope. She had to protect Hope. She was so tired, so hurt, so desperate for someone to be on her side. She signed the document. Jonathan took the paper with a satisfied nod. You made the right choice, Mrs. Townsend. This will protect you and your daughter. Then his expression changed. A coldness entered his eyes that had not been there before. I will take this to Richard now. He should see it immediately. Grace's blood froze. But Jonathan was already walking toward the door, already pulling out his phone. The door burst open before he could leave. James Crawford stood in the doorway. The man in black, still radiating that terrifying calm. Mr. Webb. His voice was pleasant, almost friendly. Going somewhere, Jonathan froze. This is a private legal matter. James. No. James stepped into the room. His dark eyes swept from Jonathan to the document in his hand. I do not think it is. I think you just tricked a traumatized pregnant woman into signing away her parental rights. Grace's heart stopped. What James produced a tablet and showed her the document's actual language? That agreement you signed contains a clause admitting you are mentally unstable and unfit to make decisions about your child's welfare. Jonathan Webb has been working with Richard for months to prepare exactly this trap. Grace stared at the words she had not read carefully enough. Voluntary relinquishment, psychiatric evaluation, custody determination. She had signed away her rights, her daughter, her future. Give me the document. James's voice dropped to ice. Now! Jonathan's hand trembled. This is harassment. Try me. James took one step forward. His size seemed to fill the entire room. But first, give me the document. Jonathan looked at Grace, at James blocking the only exit. His options were evaporating. He handed over the paper. James examined it, then looked at Grace with something that might have been respect. This document is void, because Jonathan Webb is not actually working for Richard. He is working for us. Chapter 4. The pattern revealed. Grace stared at James in confusion. Her head was spinning from medication and shock. I do not understand. Jonathan Webb has been an FBI informant for 18 months. James tucked the document into his jacket, documenting Richard's financial crimes. This trap was designed to catch Richard in the act of conspiracy to commit fraud, and it worked perfectly. Jonathan cleared his throat awkwardly. My apologies for the theatrics, Mrs. Townsend. It was necessary to build the case. Grace did not know whether to laugh or scream. She settled for staring at both men like they had lost their minds. The door opened again. Victor Sullivan entered, followed by a woman Grace did not recognize at first. Silver hair swept back elegantly, blue eyes that held a depth of emotion Grace could not name. Tall, regal, moving with quiet certainty toward the bed. The woman stopped beside Grace, reached out, brushed a strand of hair from her forehead with trembling fingers. Grace's breath caught. Who are you? The woman's eyes filled with tears she was fighting to contain. My name is Margaret Sullivan. She paused. And I am your mother. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Grace shook her head. My mother abandoned me. When I was 2 years old, she left and never came back. Margaret's face crumpled with grief. I never abandoned you. Grace, I was taken from you. Forcibly. Through legal manipulation and threats. Richard's father helped orchestrate it 30 years ago. The Townsends have been doing this for generations. Grace felt the room spin. She had grown up believing her mother chose to leave, had spent her childhood blaming herself for being unworthy of love. Every story she heard about her mother came through filters of contempt and dismissal. James stepped forward. His voice was gentle now. Mr. Sullivan asked me to investigate Richard 3 weeks ago. What I found was much worse than an affair or financial manipulation. He pulled up files on his tablet. Richard Townsend has been running the same scheme for over a decade. He finds wealthy women with family connections, marries them quickly, gets them pregnant, then extracts money and disappears when it becomes inconvenient. Grace's hands went cold. What, you are not his first wife, Mrs. Townsend? You are his fourth? James showed her photographs, documents, marriage certificates from different states. 4 years ago, Richard married Melissa Patterson in Nevada. They have a daughter named Emma. She is 3 years old. Richard abandoned them when Emma was 6 months old. He owes over $90,000 in back child support. Grace's vision blurred with tears. Before Melissa, there was Sandra Williams in Oregon. Same pattern: marriage, pregnancy, abandonment. Her son Tyler is 5 now. Before Sandra, there was Diane Morrison in Arizona. Her daughter is 12. 6 women, 7 children. Over a decade of systematic fraud and abandonment. Grace looked at Margaret. At the mother she thought had abandoned her. Did Richard know who I was when he married me? Margaret nodded slowly. Her voice was thick with grief. He targeted you specifically because you are Victor Sullivan's niece. Because marrying you gave him access to our family's resources. You were never chosen for love. Grace, you were chosen for money. The truth settled over Grace like a funeral shroud. Everything she thought she knew about her marriage was a lie. Every memory, every moment, every whispered promise in the dark, all of it was strategic manipulation. Chapter 5. False Hope Shattered. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of legal documents and police interviews. Rick was escorted off the Castellano property by security guards. A restraining order was filed within hours. Grace's bank accounts were protected. Evidence was being compiled for criminal charges. For the first time since her wedding day, Grace felt like she could breathe. She sat in the hospital bed 3 days after the assault, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Hope kicked gently against her palm. Margaret sat beside her, reading a book of poetry aloud in a soft voice. "It is over." Grace whispered the words like a prayer. "He cannot hurt me anymore." Margaret smiled and squeezed her hand. "You are safe now, sweetheart. I will never let anyone take you from me again." A nurse brought dinner. Grace ate for the first time in days without feeling nauseous. She laughed at something Margaret said about the terrible hospital coffee. She started to believe that the nightmare was finally ending. Then the door opened. A woman stepped inside. Long black hair, hazel eyes, red dress that clung to every curve of her body. Veronica Blake. Grace's heart stopped. Security was supposed to keep her out. How did she get past the guards? Veronica smiled. The expression did not reach her eyes. "I just wanted to apologize." Her voice dripped with false sweetness. "For any misunderstanding at the cathedral, I hope you and the baby are doing well." Margaret stood immediately. "Get out of this room." Veronica ignored her. She walked closer to Grace's bed with deliberate slowness. "I actually came to help you, Grace, to tell you something you deserve to know." She paused for dramatic effect. "I am pregnant. 10 weeks. Richard's baby." Grace felt the words like a knife to the chest. "He is leaving you as soon as Hope is born. We have already picked out an apartment together. That building in Pacific Heights you wanted." Veronica's smile sharpened. "He said you would appreciate the irony." Margaret moved toward the call button. Grace sat frozen, unable to process another betrayal. Here is something every woman who has been through this will recognize. The moment when you think you have survived the worst, and then something even worse appears. The moment when hope feels like a cruel joke. Veronica leaned closer. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Richard wants you to accept the settlement his lawyers offered. $200,000 in full custody. Take it and walk away quietly, or things will get much worse for you." Grace's fear transformed into something else. Something harder. "Get out," Veronica laughed. "You think you have power here? You are nothing. Richard is going to destroy you in court. He is going to take hope away from you. He is going to make sure everyone knows you are an unfit mother." "I said, get out!" Veronica's smile vanished. Her hand shot forward and shoved Grace's shoulder. Hard. Grace fell backward against the hospital bed rails. Pain exploded through her back. Alarms started beeping as monitors registered her elevated heart rate. Margaret screamed for security. Nurses rushed into the room. James Crawford appeared in the doorway seconds later. He took in the scene with one sweep of his dark eyes. "Restrain her." His voice was ice. "She just assaulted a pregnant woman. Again." Security guards grabbed Veronica's arms. She struggled and screamed as they dragged her toward the door. "You cannot do this. Richard will destroy all of you." James stepped aside to let them pass. Then he turned to Grace with an expression that was almost gentle. "There is something you should know. Veronica Blake is not pregnant. We have her medical records. She has never been pregnant. The announcement was a manipulation tactic designed to destabilize you." Grace stared at him. All of it was a lie. "All of it?" James nodded. "Veronica is not just Richard's mistress. She is his partner in the scheme. She helps identify wealthy targets. She receives a percentage of whatever Richard extracts from his victims. She has been doing this for years. Grace closed her eyes, breathed through the pain in her back, felt hope kicking furiously inside her. The nightmare was not over. It was just beginning. Chapter 6. The fugitive Rick Townsend learned about Veronica's arrest within the hour. His lawyer called with the news, voice tight with barely controlled panic. The evidence against him was overwhelming. The cathedral footage, the financial records James had compiled, Jonathan Webb's testimony about 18 months of documented fraud, and now Veronica's assault charge, which would likely lead to her cooperating with prosecutors. Rick sat in his home office surrounded by the trappings of wealth he had stolen from 6 women. Crystal decanters, leather-bound books, a Rolex watch that cost more than most people earned in a year. All of it meant nothing if he went to prison. He made his decision quickly, the same decision he had made 4 times before when consequences caught up with him. Run. He emptied his safe. Cash, gold coins, bearer bonds, everything portable and untraceable. He transferred what remained in his accessible accounts to offshore banks in countries that did not cooperate with American law enforcement. He packed one bag, burned documents in the fireplace, destroyed phones and computers with a hammer. By midnight, he was driving toward the Mexican border in a rental car registered to a name no one would recognize. He thought he was being clever, thought he had covered his tracks, thought the same tricks that had worked 4 times before would work again. He did not know that James Crawford had been tracking his financial movements for 3 weeks, did not know that every offshore account he thought was secret had been flagged by federal investigators, did not know that his route to the border had been predicted with 90% accuracy. Rick drove through the night, past sleeping towns and empty highways, past the life he was abandoning without a second thought. He reached a remote cabin near the border just before dawn, a place he had purchased years ago under a false name, a bolt hole for exactly this kind of emergency. He thought he was safe. The helicopter found him 6 hours later. Rick heard the rotors before he saw the lights, the rhythmic thump, thump, thump of blades cutting through mountain air. Then the spotlight swept across the cabin windows like the eye of God. He grabbed the handgun he kept in his emergency bag, checked the clip with trembling hands, told himself he would shoot his way out if necessary. The cabin door splintered inward. Federal agents in tactical gear poured through the opening. Flashlights and laser sights painted the walls in red and white. Rick fired once, wild, panicked. The bullet struck an agent in the shoulder and sent him spinning backward. Then something hit Rick from behind, a weight like a falling building. He crashed to the floor with his face pressed against rough wooden boards. James Crawford's voice spoke directly into his ear. Richard Townsend, you are under arrest for assault, bigamy, fraud, attempted murder of a federal officer, and flight to avoid prosecution. Rick struggled uselessly against the weight pinning him down. I have rights. I want my lawyer. James secured the handcuffs with a metallic click. Your lawyer is the one who helped us build this case. He leaned closer. And Mrs. Townsend sends her regards. Chapter 7. Sisters in Survival. 3 weeks after Rick's arrest, Grace sat in the study of her uncle's estate surrounded by women she had never met. Melissa Patterson had driven 12 hours from Nevada, blonde hair pulled back in a tired ponytail. 3-year-old Emma sleeping in her arms. Sandra Williams had flown from Oregon, dark hair streaked with early gray. Her son Tyler played quietly in the corner with building blocks. 2 other women joined by video call, Jennifer from Texas, Anna from Florida, both with children, both with stories that mirrored Grace's own. 6 women, 7 children, 1 predator. Grace looked around the room at these strangers who were connected by the worst thing that had ever happened to them. Thank you for coming. Her voice was steady despite her nerves. I know this is difficult. I know some of you have spent years trying to forget Richard exists, but I think we need each other. Melissa spoke first. Her voice was bitter, hard. Need each other for what, lady? I have been raising Emma alone for 3 years. working two jobs, fighting for every dollar of child support that never comes. What could you possibly offer me resources? Grace answered simply. My uncle is paying for lawyers to consolidate all of our claims. Richard's assets are being seized. His offshore accounts have been frozen. There is enough money to cover years of back child support for everyone? Melissa's expression shifted, doubt replaced by something that might have been hope. Sandra leaned forward. What do you want in exchange? Nothing. Grace met her eyes. I want Richard to face consequences. I want our children to know they were not abandoned because of anything they did wrong. And I want to make sure he never does this to anyone else. The room was quiet for a long moment. Then Jennifer spoke through the video call. Her voice cracked with emotion. I have been waiting 6 years for someone to believe me. 6 years of people telling me to move on. Telling me it was my fault for trusting him. Telling me I should have known better. She wiped her eyes. I believe you. She said, I believe all of you. One by one. The others nodded, agreed, joined. What do we call ourselves? Anna asked from the video screen. Grace thought about it. About survival, about strength, about the daughters and sons who would grow up knowing their mothers fought for them. Sisters in survival, because we survived him, and we will survive everything that comes next. Here is something every woman who has been through trauma needs to understand. You are never as alone as you feel. There are always others who understand your pain. Finding them can save your life. Building community with them can change the world. The meeting lasted 3 hours. They shared stories, compared notes, discovered patterns in Richard's behavior that none of them had recognized alone. He always complimented their intelligence first, always isolated them from family, always moved fast toward marriage and pregnancy, always started the abuse subtly, then escalated until his victims felt too trapped to leave. By the end, they had formed something stronger than a support group. They had formed a family, bound not by blood, but by survival. Chapter 8. The Trial. The trial began on a gray Tuesday morning in late autumn. Grace sat in the front row of the courtroom with Margaret beside her. Hope had been born 2 months earlier. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, perfect, strong, sleeping peacefully in Margaret's arms while justice was being served. Rick entered in an orange jumpsuit. His face was bruised from an incident in the detention center. His confident swagger was gone. He shuffled to the defense table like a man who already knew he was defeated. The prosecutor was a woman in her 50s with silver streaks in her dark hair. She had spent 20 years putting violent men behind bars. She approached this case with personal intensity. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she faced them with calm authority. The defendant, Richard Townsend, stands accused of assault, bigamy, fraud, and attempted murder of a federal officer. Over the next 3 days, you will see evidence that proves beyond any reasonable doubt that this man is not merely a criminal. He is a predator who has systematically destroyed the lives of 6 women and 7 children for over a decade. The evidence was presented methodically, devastatingly. Cathedral footage showed Rick's fist connecting with Grace's face. The sound of her body hitting marble made several jurors flinch. Financial records demonstrated the pattern of fraud, money extracted from each wife, hidden accounts, forged documents, lies stacked upon lies. Testimony from each woman painted a picture of calculated manipulation. The same compliments, the same isolation tactics, the same escalation of abuse. Grace testified on the second day. She walked to the witness stand with her head high. Her voice was clear and steady as she described 3 years of marriage to a monster. She described the first time he hit her, the way he apologized afterward, the way she believed his promises to change. She described the isolation, how he convinced her to quit her job, how he monitored her phone, how he made her feel crazy for questioning his absences. She described the cathedral, the punch, the fall, the terror she felt for Hope's life. When she finished, the prosecutor asked one final question. Mrs. Mitchell, what would you like to say to the defendant? Grace looked at Rick across the courtroom, at the man who had stolen 3 years of her life, who had planned to steal her daughter, who had done the same thing to 5 other women before her. I feel sorry for you. Her voice was calm. You have spent your entire adult life manipulating and destroying people. You have 7 children who will grow up knowing their father is a convicted criminal. You will die in prison with nothing but regret for company. She paused. But I also want to thank you. Because of you, I found my mother, I found my sisters, I found my strength, and I have a daughter who will grow up knowing that her mother fought for justice. You tried to destroy me. Grace stood. You failed. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge delivered the sentence with grim satisfaction. Richard Allen Townsend, you are hereby sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Grace watched the bailiffs lead Rick away, watched the door close behind him, watched the end of the nightmare that had consumed 3 years of her life. Then she turned to Margaret, to Hope sleeping peacefully in her grandmother's arms, to the family she had found in the wreckage of her marriage. For the first time in years, the world felt open, and Grace knew that healing had finally begun. Chapter 9. 3 years later, Hope is 3 years old now. She has Grace's blonde hair and green eyes, her grandmother's stubborn chin, her great-grandmother's defiance that had survived 30 years of separation. She asks about her daddy sometimes, when she sees other children at the playground with their fathers, when her preschool friends talk about their daddies and their houses with 2 parents. Grace tells her the truth, age-appropriate truth, gentle truth. Your daddy made bad choices. She explains during these conversations, big bad choices that hurt people. That is not your fault. That will never be your fault. You are loved. You are wanted. You are more than enough. Hope nods seriously. She accepts the explanation with the resilience that children carry like armor. Then she asks for cookies, and the moment passes. Grace built a new life from the wreckage of her marriage. She returned to museum work, curating exhibits about women's history, about survival, about the strength that exists in community. She lives in a cottage near Victor's estate, small but filled with light, flowers in every window, books on every shelf, Hope's artwork covering the refrigerator in layers of color and joy. Margaret lives 2 blocks away. They have dinner together every Sunday. Sometimes Victor joins them with stories about the wine industry and terrible jokes about grapes. James Crawford still works for Victor. He stops by occasionally with gifts for Hope, a stuffed elephant for her 2nd birthday, a picture book about brave girls for her 3rd. The man in black, sitting cross-legged on a tiny chair, having a tea party with a toddler. It makes Grace laugh every time. The sisters in survival are still together. Monthly video calls filled with updates and encouragement. Annual reunions at the estate where the children play together and the mothers share wine and war stories. Emma and Hope call each other sisters now. They have matching bracelets. They are planning their first sleepover for when they are both a little older. 7 children who share the same terrible father. 7 children who will grow up knowing they are loved. Not because of him, in spite of him. Here is what Grace learned from the worst experience of her life. Survival is not just about getting through the darkness. It is about building something beautiful on the other side. Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is. Document everything. Evidence matters when justice comes calling. Never sign anything under pressure. True allies give you time to think. You cannot love someone into loving you back. If they wanted to treat you better, they would. You are never as alone as you feel. There are always people who will believe you, who will fight for you, who will stand beside you in the dark. And sometimes the universe does not give you what you want. It gives you exactly what you need. Chapter 10, The Bracelet. It is Tuesday morning. Bright California sunshine streams through the windows of Grace's cottage. Hope is playing with blocks on the living room floor, building towers and knocking them down, building them again. The doorbell rings. Grace opens it to find James Crawford standing on her porch. All black suit, same as always. But something is different. Something is in his hand. He holds out a small velvet box. We recovered this from Richard's safe deposit box. His voice is quiet. It took 3 years of legal battles, but it finally belongs to the right person. Grace opens the box. A delicate antique bracelet gleams up at her, gold filigree set with small sapphires. Her great-grandmother's bracelet, the one Margaret had been forced to leave behind when Richard's father drove her out of her daughter's life 30 years ago. Grace had seen pictures of this bracelet, had heard stories about it, had never imagined she would hold it in her hands. Thank you. The words are inadequate, but they are all she has. James, for everything. Then and now and everything in between. James nods once. His dark eyes are warm, almost gentle. You did the hard part. Mrs. Mitchell, I just helped. Then the man in black turns, walks back to his car, drives away. Grace closes the door, walks to the living room, sits on the floor beside Hope. Mama. Hope looks up from her blocks. What is that? This belonged to your great-great-grandmother. Grace opens the box and shows Hope the sapphires catching the light. She gave it to your great-grandmother, and now it belongs to our family again. Hope reaches out with chubby fingers, touches the gold carefully. Pretty. She says, yes. Grace feels tears on her cheeks. Happy tear, healing tears. It is very pretty. She clasps the bracelet around her wrist, feels the weight of it, the history, the survival. 4 generations of women. Her great-grandmother who fought to keep her family together. Her grandmother who carried the memories. Margaret who survived 30 years of separation without losing hope. And Grace herself. Now Hope, a line of women who refused to break, who bent but did not shatter, who survived the unsurvivable and built something beautiful on the other side. Tell me a story. Hope climbs into Grace's lap. About the bracelet, Grace wraps her arms around her daughter, breathes in the sweet smell of baby shampoo and sunshine. Once upon a time, there was a very brave woman, and she had a bracelet that she loved very much. Hope settles against her chest. Listening, the brave woman had a daughter, and that daughter had a daughter, and that daughter had a daughter named Hope, and each one of them was strong and brave and kind. What happened to them? They lived happily ever after. Grace kisses the top of Hope's head, because they had each other, and that was the most important thing of all. Outside, the California sun continues to shine. Birds sing in the trees. A gentle breeze rustles the flowers in the window boxes. The cathedral windows shattered 3 years ago, but the woman who fell did not shatter with them. She stood back up. She found her mother. She found her sisters. She found her voice. And she taught her daughter that women in their family do not break. They bend, they adapt, they survive, and they always stand back up. If this story helped you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, because no one should suffer alone, and the truth always finds its way into the light. The Millionaire.